Hey, what's going on? Jason Cutter, author of Selling with Authentic Persuasion, Transform from Order Taker to Quota Breaker. And I got to say, the best advice I ever received is to make sure and treat people in the way that they want to be treated, give them what they want to receive, and help support people in what they're looking for. And when you do that, from a leadership position, then it works amazing. And that applies to being in charge of a team and even in sales.
Wow. That's great advice, man. So when did you learn that, or is that your advice, or tell me more about that?
Um, it's not my advice. It's a compilation of a ton of different things I've gathered over the years. But I had a CEO that I worked for early on, the first time I was in a leadership role, and helped me understand that, the default mode that most humans have is to think that everyone sees the world that we see it, right? Which is, I think everything is like this, so everyone else should. In sales, you see that as a terrible habit where someone becomes a manager and they think, oh, everyone is motivated by happy hours. So as long as I do happy hours, everyone's going to be excited. And that's literally untrue in most ways. There's a segment, yes, but most not. And then I just took that advice and compiled it with things like the 5 love languages, which is actually one of my number one most recommended leadership books, which is weird. They actually made one for the workplace. But, to treat people in a way that they feel appreciated, loved, and supported, and then it's so much different.
Yeah. Wow. I love that, man. I love that. And interestingly enough, and then we'll jump in the book a little bit more in the book and that is, you're the first person that I've seen talk about sales and leadership as it relates to love based on Tim Sanders' book, Love is the Killer App, which is a book that totally changed my life. So I thought that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up that book. I haven't thought about that book for a long time. It is in storage, but I remember reading that book when I was in the mortgage business, and that was 2003 when we were shifting to doing business by referral instead of cold marketing. And Love is the Killer. I read that, and I was like, this is unlike anything I've ever heard of in business. And unlike what I thought sales is about, because I didn't want to see myself as a salesperson because I thought sales was gross. And I was like, wait, this is totally different when you look at it this way, and use that language internally or externally.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it came out in 2002, released on the cover of Fast Company magazine with a picture of Tim and a big heart. And the
Yeah.
first printing of that book, I don't know if you know this, Jason, he looked like a beatnik. He looked like Roy Orbison. It was orange. He had thick glasses, right? And the second one that got released is the one that we've all seen. It's the white
With the
cover
heart.
with the heart on it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's the one I have.
so yeah, cool, man. Cool, cool. So I love that. So I think that's a great place to jump from. You talk about how you didn't want to see yourself as a salesperson. And I got to tell you, that's not uncommon to the people I talk. Oh, sales is gross. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Sales is gross?
Yep.
I don't think
100%.
so. So talk to me about that, Jason. Where did that come from for you, man? And how did you make that transition?
So my mom was in finance and banking throughout her career and moved her way up in organizations. My dad was an engineer after the Navy and moved his way up in an organization. And so I'm the product of 2 analytical, loving parents who are still together today. In fact, today is their wedding anniversary. They are still together, so
Woohoo!
that's awesome. But one of my mom's first jobs that she had in or after high school was at a furniture store, and she was working in the back office, accounts receivable, that kind of thing, paperwork, bookkeeping. And she heard behind the scenes what the salespeople said about what they were doing to say to customers, what they thought of customers, what their goal was to do to customers. And she realized how terrible sales is, and then basically had the family on high alert. And basically, it was just from there. Many times growing up, we would go to buy a new car, and it would be hours and hours and hours of sitting in a dealership while she tore through everybody they could throw at her, to try to, play their games. And then you mix with that the fact that I was a shy, awkward, late blooming, bullied only child, to 2 analytical parents, and I didn't fit in, and people weren't really my thing. And I was like, man, I I couldn't imagine going into sales or anything to do with people, which then led to me getting a bachelor's degree in marine biology, tagging sharks for years as a much safer choice than dealing with humans. And then the universe had other plans for me.
Tagging sharks, huh? As
Yep.
opposed to being a selling shark, you decided to
Yeah.
tag them. Huh? That's
And
interesting.
much safer. Those things, you
Yeah.
know exactly what's on their mind. They only go in one direction. You just stay away from the business end, and you keep all your hands and legs versus humans. They're much more unpredictable.
That's so funny, man. That's cool. So, okay, so you grew up that way, right? Furniture sales, often the worst of sales, right? You got ups and you're like, I'm going to pounce on you. I'm going to eat you alive like a
Right?
shark. And yet,
What
often that doesn't have to be true, right?
No, and what's interesting is I had a client actually because I have no experience in retail and I have no experience selling furniture, but I had a client during the pandemic that was having me do some training virtual for their furniture stores, which was fun. All the principles are the same, all the sales is the same, all the fundamentals are the same, no matter what industry I've done work for. But one of the interesting things with furniture, and I know this from experience as a customer, is you walk in and there's the person who pounces on you that's just oozing with gross sales, high pressure tactics. And then there's the times where you walk into the store and you literally can't find an adult when you're looking for guidance and you can't find someone. You have to beg them to sell you something because they're such an order taker, because they're so at the other end of the spectrum, which is why I wrote my book. And I know there's a place in the middle, which is not at those extremes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great, man. So good. So that's as good a place as any here to bounce into the book. By the way, great book, Jason. Congratulations. Always
Thank you.
love reading a good book, good sales book that's actually helpful. So let's start with some definition here. Authentic persuasion, which is interesting, right? Because I think some people see persuasion as manipulation. And I know that's not true for you. So give us some definition here. Authentic persuasion. What the heck is it to you?
So the biggest thing from the authentic side is understanding who you are, your strengths, what it takes to be successful in sales, and I would contend in life in general, right? Because everything in life is some level of sales and persuasion. It's all relationships. It's all engaging with someone else. So the principles literally apply to everything, right? It could be living with or living by authentic persuasion. But the authentic piece is about you. I see a lot of people who go into sales and they think they have to be like X. They have to do X to be successful, right? They've got to be Wolf of Wall Street. They've got to be able to sell a pen to somebody, which is the grossest thing. I cannot stand when people bring that up. I just can't. They think I gotta be like Boiler Room. I've got to be like this to be successful, and it's just not true. A, the world may not like that, and then B, if it's not you, it's not sustainable, right? You can't play that part. Yes, there's people who think in sales, I'm just an actor and I'm playing this part, but to do that 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of your career, it's not sustainable versus being authentic. The other part for the authenticity piece is, why do you want to be in sales? Why do you want to close more deals, which is to make money, but why is that important? And the deeper layers. Then we get into the persuasion piece, which, like you said, is sometimes thought of with manipulation. Manipulation is very clear. That's when you're doing something to something else, and it's for your benefit, right? We use manipulation in like, I'm manipulating the clay into a bowl, or I'm manipulating the wood into a table. The wood doesn't have a choice. It's doing whatever I'm going to do to it. And we see that with sales. We see that with relationships. We see that with lots of things. Persuasion is a little more open, which is, I'm going to persuade you. I try to use positive persuasion when I instruct people, which is, I want to leave you better than I found you. I want to help you get unstuck because there's something you want, but there's also a place where you're in right now and you're stuck in your comfort zone.
Awesome. I think that's a great definition. And I think that's something, honestly, we all do, right? That's as a leader, as a salesperson, as a parent, it's something we all do. So knowing that, I'm just curious, is there, what's the downside? Why would people not want to be an authentic persuader? Why would they not want to embrace this? Because as I read the book, to me, it's like, this is just something I think everybody should want to do.
A lot of it has to go with in people's minds, they think that sales has to be a certain way. And the terms authentic persuasion, the authentic piece, bringing who they really are, people won't like that. It won't be effective. They won't be able to close enough deals. That's not what it takes to succeed, right? Like being effective in sales is all about tactics and strategies and closing lines and cornering somebody and trapping them and doing this and doing that. And people think that's what it takes to be successful in sales, just because they don't know any different. Most of the time, they're just stuck at the order taker end of the spectrum, which also isn't working. The other part, and this is where there's a lot of pushback that I get, at least on the surface, is when I talk about the persuasion piece, one of the biggest parts is to actually have a process. You cannot persuade someone effectively and do that at scale repeatedly over and over again as a career without a process. You could get luck, like you could go play baseball today, and if you don't have any idea what you're doing, every once in a while you might hit the ball, but not consistently. When you have a process and you have mechanics to it, it will be more consistent. You'll know when you're winning and not. Sales attracts a lot of people who get into sales because they just want to wing it, and they just like talking people into things, and it's what they've done their whole life, and they found that they're good at it, and pushing people to do things or talking them into it or telling great stories. And then you say, all right, I want you to follow this process, and I actually want you to do X. Then I want you to do this, and then I want you to go over here, and I want you to say this. And they're like, no, man, don't give me any structure. I got into sales because I don't like structure. Just let me do what I do best. Giant air quotes for anyone listening but not watching. And they just they buck the process. And then their results are just all over the place. Literally, it's why they hit slumps. It's why they have struggles. It's why it's so inconsistent, because they literally just are playing sales instead of like treating it like a profession.
Wow. That's so interesting, because a couple of weeks ago, I had someone that I was training in sales said, just give me a list and let me call. I'm like, well, you don't know the product. You don't know the solution. You don't know what we do. You don't understand our process. I get maybe you have one. You probably don't, right? But that's not going to work. You have to do it this way, right? We set them up in a cadence, in a sequence for a reason. This is how things work. So I like how you said playing sales versus the profession of sales. So I'm curious, from a sports perspective here, and I don't know how sports you are here because you mentioned that. Do you see that people who are naturally good at sales, and I'm air quoting again here, right, that think they're naturally good at sales, do you think that they have a better chance of being successful, or do you think it's those that have discipline and rigor around that, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's an absolute combination. I think the natural ability, the natural born salesperson is really a fallacy. I think there's some parts of personality and behaviors and experiences that can lend itself better, right? Like if you're a pure introvert that is afraid of people, that's going to be tough to have conversations, but I can prove it like myself. Most people don't believe how I was as a child, but I'm telling you, like it was rough from a social standpoint, right? Like I had a good childhood, had everything I needed, but socially it was very rough. But I evolved and made myself into who I am. It's why I wrote that chapter in the book called Making Yourself into a Sales Professional. I think when we see someone and we think they're a natural born salesperson, they've just been working on it for a long time, right? They're that kid. And if you look at it, when you see that kid that's like 3 or 4 years old and they can talk themselves into anything, they get their way, they're very persuasive. By the time you meet that kid when they're 25 or 30 years old, they've been working on it for 20 years. Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. They are now a master at it because they've been working on it for 20 years. Some of it's born, but some of it's literally just using it and doing it, right? And then there's the part where you make it. Now, here's the thing, and just like sports, right? Because I'm more of a basketball fan, but we can look at anybody. There's the people who are born with some natural talents, athletic ability, maybe tall, maybe quick, maybe all of these things, and they just lean on that. So they show up, they want to play basketball, they think they should be in the NBA, they're not practicing, they're not working hard, and they think they should just get it because, or be given it because they've got the natural talent, right? And they don't understand why they don't have more, and they don't get those opportunities. You see those people at pickup games where they're absolutely amazing, but they're just lazy and they don't put any effort because they feel entitled to it because they were born with this gift. And then you see the others where, let's look at like a LeBron James, born with some amazing talents and then worked on it like crazy and works on it every day, all the time, and puts in the effort. And it's that combination. Same thing with sales, literally the same thing. You can have some personality parts that help. You can understand the sales success traits like I outlined in the book, and then you can just keep working on it and getting better yourself, your skills, your techniques, your processes, understanding human behavior, and you can outwork somebody who's just relying on that natural talent. Just give me a list, people. You can crush those give me a list people. And I've done it myself in many a call center, sitting in a seat where I just crush that lazy, like, just give me the list guy.
I love that. I'm so glad. That's such a good thing, because I happen to agree with that. I'm not a natural born salesperson. I like to talk to people for sure, but I bucked process long time, bucked process. Thought, you know what? Hey, I just want to talk to people. And frankly, that doesn't work. I mean, that's great if you're, now and then, right, when the economy's good, that's probably possible, right? If you're selling something that people want, but if you're actually having to, people have to decide whether or not to work with you to move from order taker to professional sales crusher, right? I mean, that's so different. So let's talk more about that. Let's talk first, though, about authenticity. In the book, you talk about authenticity is like karaoke. So talk to me about that, Jason. I thought that was so much fun because I love karaoke. I go first because for one song, I'm the best. So talk to me about karaoke and authenticity.
Well, and I think that the biggest thing with that is you just got to know who you are and embrace your strengths. Like, when it comes to karaoke, public speaking, all that kind of stuff, people get really afraid of it. And you got to know what works, what doesn't, what you like to do. And then it's also about, understanding why people are afraid of things like karaoke and public speaking, right? Going back to the tribal society and where we started as a tribe, right? And the amygdala in our brain is still thinking two things. One is everything is out to kill us, and our survival is based on being a group, right? You do not survive very long out on your own in the wild versus the lions and tigers and bears, right? Like, that doesn't happen. We are where we are on the planet as a group. And so that's why I think people fear public speaking more than death, because you fail at public speaking, get ostracized, get kicked out of the tribe of humans, and now you're going to die, right? People would rather be in the box than speaking at the funeral, right? And so the same thing with the karaoke is people would like to do that. And it's understanding, like, you're not going to die. You're going to be okay. You got to be who you are. And when it comes to sales, it's really important too, because you've just got to embrace both that fear, and understand it inside of you. And then also just be you, right? If you're quirky or you're weird or you say funny things or you make jokes or you make mistakes, like, as long as you're trying to do the right thing for people, all that stuff will come across.
Yeah, absolutely. If your intention is right, you can get the attention that you need to make a sale. I think that's a good lesson for us. So with that, you talked about fear there. I want to go deeper on that. You actually say that no fear is important, but it's KNOW fear. So talk to us about that. How do we get to know fear, embrace fear, and kind of make fear a helpful thing instead of a bad thing?
Yeah, that KNOW fear is so important because, again, we all have that, right? Everyone has some fears. Everyone has something they're afraid of, and not the spiders and clowns and sharks and that kind of stuff, but like the people side, right? What are you afraid of? What's keeping you from moving forward? Again, we could talk about sales. We could talk about life. What is that fundamentally, in your comfort zone? Outside of it is the unknown. Unknown equals danger. Danger equals death in that primal part of our brain. And you've got to understand that, especially when we talk about sales. Sales at its root is a very difficult game to play, meaning that if you're amazingly successful based on your lead source in your industry and, all these caveats, you might close 30 to 40% of your sales, right? Some industries you might close 10%, some close whatever, but that means if you're closing 30% of your opportunities, that means you're failing 70% of the time, which is tough to pick yourself up. You're going to be afraid. You're going to hesitate. You're going to worry. You don't want to be, rejected. And part of that is understanding, where does that come from? Both the inherent side as humans, and then also from your childhood, right? Like that time that you picked up the phone, if you're old enough like us, where, you had to actually pick up a phone or write somebody a note. You couldn't just text or email and do it that way. And then you had to put it all on the line to ask that person out, and they reject you. And then that sticks in your mind and you never want to pick up the phone again. And now you're in sales, right? And so where does that come from? Understanding that, because it's a mental game and it's a mental battle, and it's you versus yourself in most of sales, right? It's literally a mindset focus.
Yeah, right. So rejection 7 or 8 or 9 times out of 10 is tough. I mean, that's tough,
Yeah.
but just like, getting married, you only have to do it 3 or 4 times in your life. I mean, I think that's, or at least I did anyway. So right. I mean, that's important, that we understand that not everything has to be a home run, right? Not everything has to be a slam dunk, if you will, to go back to your basketball metaphor there. But that's a mindset thing. So how do we toughen up our mindset so that we can move to the point where authentic persuasion can actually be useful?
The first one is what we were just talking about, which is knowing your fears, right? Understanding your fears. The second one is an exercise that I love when I heard about it from Tim Ferriss, which is now I'm forgetting what it's called. It's basically where you're forecasting out your fears and the worst case scenarios, right? And so what you do is say, okay, if I don't make this phone call, or if I don't make a sale, what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to lose my job. Then I'm going to lose my house. Then I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to be under a bridge. And it's like, wait, is that really going to happen? Probably not. And then, you're like, okay, well, it's really not that bad, right? It's probably not going to go that route. And then the other part is just remembering why you're doing it, right? You want to overcome those fears. I'm a huge proponent of vision boards, right? And the actions that it takes to create a vision board, which people remember from The Secret. And it seems like this like woo-woo type of thing, but it's like, it really has a good purpose in the building of it and then the utilizing, right? Like I have one here that I look at that will help motivate you and remind you why you're doing what you're doing and what's important, so you can keep picking up that phone. And then the last and probably the most important part is, what are you actually doing for people that's helping get them to a better place? Understanding what you're selling, what you're offering, and the value to them. See, the problem I think with sales a lot of the times, at least the classic old school gross sales that people don't enjoy, is that person doesn't care what happens to you or not. As a customer, they just want to sell for their own benefits, right? That's what gives sales such a bad name, and why people just don't like it and worry about it, because it's so one-sided manipulation and just self-centered on the salesperson. If you're actually selling something where you actually care about your customers and you actually can and want to get them to a better place, when you do that, then a lot of that fear goes away, because you're helping. When you realize that sales is service, and sales is something you're doing for somebody and with somebody, not to them, then it's not me versus you, right? It's me wanting to help you. It's me versus your fear. But I know, like, if you listen to me enough, I know I can help you. And when you do that, it's not like you're not calling with your hand out. You're just trying to help people. And it totally changes the game.
Yeah. That resonates so hard with me, Jason. I believe, service is sales all day long. Sales is service, so much so, not in the order taking perspective where, would you like some fries with this order? But really, I am of value to you, and you will extract that value with a purchase or with a question or with a conversation. So we have value to exchange here. And I think that is often missed. I think a lot of sales people think that, to your point, right? Oh, I'm so great, and you're going to be my commission check, so therefore you should buy.
Yeah.
right?
And I think one of the biggest things, if I can interject, that's a really good process. If anyone listening or watching this is thinking, well, what I sell is not that important, or maybe it's not valuable, or I'm not really sure like where that fits in for people. You need more information about what you're selling, because if that's true, then go sell something else. The world doesn't need one more CRM. I promise. Stop. I promise. They're not going to use it anyway, because they're not using the other 17 that they bought. But really the key is whatever you're selling is understand from your customer's perspective the value it provides. And then even more important, understand from your non-customer side what would happen to them when you're forecasting out if they don't sign up with you. And I'll give you an example, right? And I learned this lesson early on, which I think was such a benefit to the way I sell and my approach and attitude with sales. After I left the mortgage business, I was helping people with who were in foreclosure, who were facing an auction date. And this is like mid 2000s. So it was still the real estate boom was going crazy, but people are always challenged and struggling, and life happens. And so people with an auction date where in a month, the sheriff was coming to take their house if they didn't fix the situation, right? It's very clear. Friday at 10 a.m. That was it, if you hadn't solved it by then. And that's when I learned about persuasion. I didn't learn anything before then, but that's where I learned about people and their behaviors and how they get stuck and how hard it is to move someone who is stuck on their position. And one of the things that I would do is if I couldn't help someone, I couldn't convince them, and I was still trying to figure all this out and they were stuck, I literally would watch. I would go to the auction at the courthouse steps and I would watch their house go to auction, and not in a I told you so, but in a this is what failure looks like as a salesperson. At the time, I didn't even think I was in sales, but I was like, this is what failure looks like. I didn't help that person get unstuck. I take that personally. Now look at this, and I want to do everything I can to not let this happen again to the next person. If it does, like, I know I gave everything I could, and I have enough stories of like doing everything I could, like where there's no doubt, even if I didn't get the sale, it wasn't on me. And I carry that no matter what I'm doing. When I help my clients that are B2B SaaS companies, I'm like, if they don't hire you, they don't buy your marketing platform, then what? Okay, then they're not optimized. Then they're not converting well. Then they might have to lay people off. Then their company might go out. Like, you could go down the chain of like, if they don't get something that's valuable that could help them, they could be worse off. And where could that go? And when you sell from that perspective, then it's truly about service.
Yeah. Wow. That is a great exercise. I think that's so valuable there, Jason. Tim Ferriss says, by the way, it's called fear setting. That's what Tim calls it, fear setting.
Thank you.
So something to look up. I'll put the link in the show notes. But I think that's so valuable. And if we move from that into something else that's valuable, let's talk about empathy as it relates to persuasion, because I think often folks miss that, right? So can you drive that home for us, Jason? Because that's a lot of what you just talked about, but maybe not with those words.
Yeah, I think it's a huge component to it. In my sales process that I have, that since writing and publishing the book, of course, as soon as you finish editing or try to draw the line in editing, there's of course more stuff you want to do. And then over the last approaching 2 years now is developing a model called the Authentic Persuasion Pathway, which is the process I've used for sales, and I've taught so many people and built structures around it. But the second stage is empathy. And usually that's the discovery question asking portion where people are just trying to get information. Most of the time in sales, people are either just going through it as an exercise, and they literally are just checking a box. When their boss says, hey, did you ask them questions about this, this, and this? They can say yes. Or the salesperson is in hero mode where they think it's all about them, so they don't really ask questions and they don't really care. I feel like the difference in a sales professional versus somebody who's just in sales is that they are using empathy in that moment, right? And thinking about the other person and trying to understand the other person and what they want, what they need, what they're afraid of, what their goals are, what their hopes are, what they've experienced in the past, no matter what you're selling, right? And some of them you have to go deeper. Some of it you can stay pretty surface depending on your sales cycle and your price point. But empathy, instead of discovery or probing, is I'm going to ask you questions. I actually care. about your answers, and I'm actually going to listen, right? Using active listening, where while you're talking, while you're answering my question, I'm actually going to be quiet and I'm actually going to listen instead of thinking about what I'm going to say next, because I'm curious and I want to know more about you so that I can help you, right? The empathy part to me is no matter what, I want to leave you in a better place. I want to get you to a better place with me or without me, even if it's just some advice, even if I'm just nice to you, right? At the grocery store, doesn't matter. I just want to leave you in a better place. And I want it to be about you. And here's the interesting thing. And this is where salespeople are like, wow, you don't need to do that. Like, I don't need to ask them any questions because I just already know. It's like you're doing it wrong and you're missing the point of what the other human actually wants, and what they're craving and what they're not getting anywhere in their life, which is someone who actually cares and asks them questions and then actually listens.
That's a different definition of empathy than I've heard, but one that really makes so much sense, that we listen and we care and we want to leave them in a better spot. Because frankly, if we don't do that, I mean, we're not going to be of service. If we're just going to be slinging product, right? We're going to be, my brother worked selling remanufactured transmissions. They're slinging trans. Well, okay, if that's it, right? But truly, the taxi cab owner who needs to outfit his fleet of 10 or 20 or 50 taxis in order to serve the people of New York City so they can get to work and do what they do every day or go grocery shopping, very different than, I'm just going to sell you one more transmission. Very different conversation. Very different thought as well. Right now we know our why, which you talked about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the example, I think that's great because, people might relate to that from a customer and then also a sales perspective, which if you're selling something that's semi-commodity and you're just doing it as a transaction instead of more relational, then yeah, you're just going to do that. And you're going to go through that and you're going to have these cycles and you're more at the whim of either your selling skills or the market, versus actually being a sales professional.
Excellent. So Jason, lots more we probably could talk about here, but I think, I think folks need to kind of bring us home here because we're probably going to blow their mind. So let's wrap one more question that's maybe a little deeper, and then we'll pivot into the final here. And that is hunting or farming when you talk about sales professionals. Many people think that it's all about just the hunt, right? I just got to knock them down and hit them with my club, right? And then that's sales. So what do you think, Jason? How do you feel that fits and works?
And just to set some context for this, because and I love this question, this topic, is there's the hunting mode, which is going out and putting in the effort for the outbound, right? Which I think is important. In this context, what you're talking about is relying all on hunting and like new business versus farming, which is relationships, referrals, pipelines, things like that, right? And I think if we just make it easy and kind of look at what might have happened 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000 years ago, if you focus only on farming to feed yourself and your tribe, it does not take too many bad hunting days for you to be starving and for everyone to die, right? It doesn't take too many winter days, too many bad hunts where you can't find something or everyone's eating nuts and berries because that's all you can forage for and it's rough. And that's why like farming just totally shifted our civilization because now there's a reliable source. The other part is also true. You can't rely only on farming because a bad crop, a bug infestation, a drought, bad weather, and you're toast, right? If you're sitting around like an order taker, lazy, watching your farm, hoping that's going to feed your family through winter, it doesn't take much for you to be screwed either. So the combination is so important. And the key is to act like a hunter and think like a farmer. So you're thinking long-term. I'm thinking relationships. I'm thinking, how do I take every single person I talk to, that I sign up, that I don't sign up, that I'm networking with, right? And that's key, that even the ones you don't sign up are very valuable if you have the right mindset, but you're thinking that long term. And then I'm acting like a hunter, which means I still got to get up every day and go out there and make things happen, right? I can't just sit back on my couch having positive thoughts and thinking affirmations and waiting for the business to come to me, right? I got to go do something. And I see a lot of people who don't do enough, and then they don't think long term enough. I also see a ton of people who get into sales. They're not sure if they want to be in sales. They don't know if it's going to be a long-term career. Might be because in their mind, they think sales is maybe not a long-term career. It's just like a starter career. I'm just going to try this thing. Sometimes they get into sales, and in the first month, it's not going great because it's like anything. It takes a while to get the skill down, right? Not just a pipeline, but a skill. And then what happens is they're like, I don't know if I'll be in this business in 6 months. So I don't really care about relationships and referrals and farming and thinking long-term. I just need to eat for today. I got rent due today. I don't care what happens. They're in survival mode. And then what happens is they never start farming. So they're always in survival mode and always hunting. And I'm telling you, one bad day, one bad week, one bad quarter, you're done. You're out. And it's a tough one to shift if you're not sure if you're going to be there long term. But you've got to do both if you want to be successful and have a much easier life in sales, a much more fun life in sales.
Definitely more rewarding, right? I mean, that's the whole thing, is because when you're serving people, you can sleep well knowing that whether you sold them or not, you were valuable. To your point earlier, right? We left them in a better place, which I think is awesome. And that's, the whole purpose of the show today is to hopefully leave people in a better place. So Jason, if they want to get started with authentic persuasion, obviously they should get a copy of the book, but give them one actionable tip that they can take away, that they can use to get started today on their journey towards selling with authentic persuasion.
That's a tough one because it depends on where people are in their journey and where they're challenged with. I would say the number one thing that helps most people in sales is the act of making a vision board, because that will center you on why you do what you do, why that's important to you, and then help you pick yourself up, right? You can't worry about the carrot and the stick. Like if you want to be successful in sales, whether you work for someone or you work for yourself, you have to be motivated on your own. And most of the time, like that's the best place that most people know what their product does. They know how to maybe have a sales process, but they don't really understand why they're doing what they're doing. And a vision board is the best way. And just to help people out, like I have an ebook on that for team leads about helping them motivate their team. And then I also created a free email series with 4 videos to walk people through that on how to make it, why to make it, and then how to make a vision board, just because universally that will help anybody in sales.
Wow. So where do we get that, Jason? I must have overlooked that on your website. I went to cutterconsultinggroup.com. So help me out, man. Where do we get that?
I hide that on my main hub. So for that and some of the ebooks, best place is jasoncutter.com, which is a hub for a lot of the content. And you can go there and pick if you're a salesperson or a leader, and then you can find those resources. Cutterconsultinggroup.com is a great one if you're in charge of a company and leading a company and you want to look at that. And then if people want, I know you're probably getting to it next, but if people want the link for the Vision Board Challenge, which you can get it on the site and just sign up, it's free. Or if you want a copy of the ebooks that I have on overcoming objections and motivating your team, email me, jason@cutterconsultinggroup.com. Just mention the show. Happy to send those to you. Just get those out there. Just help people in any way that I can, especially doing things different so that everyone can be successful.
Awesome. So folks, you're listening, you're watching, go to jasoncutter.com. Check them out, learn more there, get a copy of the book. It's absolutely fantastic. Selling with Authentic Persuasion. And if you want the stuff Jason talked about, just email jason@cutterconsultinggroup.com. Get lots of great stuff there, lots of value, just like you added today. Jason, thanks so much for sharing some time with me today and for leaving me in a better place than I was when we started. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.